Hello and welcome to Fintech Impact. I'm your host, Jason Pereira. Today on the show, I invited back Tea Nicola of Wealthbar and Pawel Brzeminski of Snap Projections. Recently, Snap was acquired by Wealthbar, and prior to that, Wealthbar was acquired by CI Investments. So I thought I'd bring them both back on to discuss the merger or the acquisition and see what the future holds for these two. And here's my interview with Tea and Pawel.
Tea, Pawel, good to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me as well.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. So you've both been on before, so you know the routine, but we're going to go through it again. So we'll go with Tea first. Tea Nicola of CEO of Wealthbar. Tell us about Wealthbar.
Yeah, so Wealthbar is one of Canada's first robo-advisors. We do everything that your traditional advisor can do, but we do it all online for a lower cost. And, we have a modern mobile app and a pretty spiffy dashboard. And so that's wealthbar.com.
And Pawel Brzeminski. I got that right?
That's perfect.
Okay,
much better than most.
Yeah. Pawel Brzeminski,
yes, that's
CEO of Snap Projections. Go for it.
Wonderful. So our value proposition hasn't really evolved much in the last 5 years. Financial planning platform, we help financial advisors ensure their clients won't run out of money in retirement by providing a robust, easy-to-use, customizable, and transparent financial planning platform.
Okay, so you've both been on. So the obvious reason you guys are on is you decided to get hitched. Second, I'm not going to call myself a matchmaker, but you're the second pair of guests who decided to get hitched. So glad to hear it. And for the record, Pawel, in case you're wondering, Pawel kept this very quiet because when I asked him point blank if anyone had made overtures about buying him out, he said, "Well, there's been a couple of inquiries, but nothing to talk about yet." And I should have seen it coming based on the look on his face. So I guess our friendship isn't as good as I thought it was. That's okay.
It's still very strong, Jason. Still very strong. There's some things I couldn't talk about at the time.
Yes. Yes. So I know what the line is. You will not tell me anything you're legally bound not to tell me. Got it. Okay. So moving on. So let's talk about the reason for this merger or this acquisition. So let's each of you, ladies first. That's the process here right now. So Tea, tell me from your standpoint, what was the appeal of Snap Projections and why you wanted to get hitched?
Okay, so as I mentioned to you earlier in our conversation, I met Pawel over 4 years ago. He basically sent me an email out of the blue and said that he had a financial planning tool that he would like to demo for me. And I was having come from the NaviPlan world. I did not really want to use NaviPlan in going forward. So I was literally creating a workbook out of Excel, and I had a report made out of pages that, had branded. So I would do the calculation in Excel and then fill in these fields in this report and then push it out to the clients. And Pawel showed it to me, and I had this hallelujah moment. It's exactly what I needed. It was one screen overview, and it was robust enough to be able to scenario plan really easily, and it handled split income taxation both in retirement, which is exactly what we were doing. So we started using Snap Projections right away, and then over the last 4 years, our relationship developed. And then after we joined CI and the subsidiary of CI have a very strong affinity to financial planning and to complex financial planning, this just made sense.
Excellent.
So here we are now.
Yeah, so it was not an overnight fling. It was a long-term wooing of clients. Okay, perfect. So, and as for those of you who missed it, Tea, you were acquired by CI back when, was it?
In January 2019.
Yeah, so that was well after we spoke the first time on the podcast.
Yes.
Okay. So, Pawel, from your standpoint, what was the appeal of this deal?
Well, as Tea mentioned, this was a great relationship, and as we were joking just before we started, it's a long distance relationship. It's a long-term relationship as well. But it really, as Tea mentioned, it really started making sense. And from my perspective, I mean, it's been actually about 5 years since I started Snap Projections. I was at a point that we were growing basically the company in a self-funded way, right? So of course there's a lot of challenges around growing the business, especially fintech business, especially software-based business in that way. So I was basically started looking for funding and partners, and I pretty much went through all the different options, all the way from angel investors to VCs to private equity, even personal loans. And I basically through this process, I realized that we need more resources because I wanted to invest in the platform. I really want to build a better product. I mean, build something really decent, I would say. But I think we can really add a lot more value for advisors by improving the product, by further scaling the team. And really ensuring that our customer support and as we call it, actually customer success is very strong, and we can really double down on that and provide not just the platform, not just the tool, and say how this is how you use it, but how do you become successful with that. So when Tea actually started the conversation, I thought, well, timing was perfect for us, and that's probably one reason why we basically were able to discuss the details very quickly and decided to work much more closely together.
Excellent.
Actually, serendipitously, I approached Pawel exactly on our 4-year anniversary.
Yeah, that's true.
That is hilarious. That is fantastic. All right. So basically, all right, you've been working together already as kind of a vendor and client relationship. Tell me about how you see this evolving over time from both your standpoints. So Tea, besides buying out someone you were paying a check to before, no longer having to cut that check, how do you see what Pawel's built helping you evolve what's going on at Wealthbar?
Well, we've always had a very big emphasis on financial planning, and we deliver comprehensive financial plans to a large segment of our clientele, and we continue to do that. And in addition to us being able to now serving all the advisors and working with the advisors on our platform, it just made sense to basically own software that is going to eventually become what I want to see, which is a vision for a full practice management platform for an independent financial advisor.
Awesome.
So back-end office of wealth management, financial planning, tools for marketing and share of wallet analysis and all of that stuff. So the advisors can truly focus on building relationships, prospecting, servicing their clients, and not necessarily fiddling with back office processes or calculators. And that's really the vision, to help the advisors get more efficient and be able to effectively, we talked about this before as well, but effectively service, thousands of clients as opposed to hundreds of clients that they can do right now.
Okay. So, from your standpoint, it's safe to say that this was a required tool for basically giving you greater control over your own destiny.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So Pawel, from your standpoint, what excites you the most about being able to work on that vision? Like where do you think you can add the most value in that regard?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. So, there's a lot of value we've been really adding to advisors over the last 5 years. And I think it's worthwhile to stress that we're not really changing dramatically a lot of things at Snap at this point. This is really acceleration of what we've been doing, plus a huge opportunity to work with Wealthbar and with Tea. So, and from our standpoint, there's a lot of value that we've been able to generate for advisors, all the way from just starting 5 years ago, which is the focus on retirement, estate, the decumulation, estate planning, decumulation planning. There's a lot of opportunities still. I think we have fairly comprehensive platform at this point. But there's a lot more value beyond that. I think if Jason, you've probably talked to so many times about APIs, for example, connectivity between different systems. I think the ability for us to actually work so closely, that just opens up another opportunity to really look at a number of things that Tea just mentioned. But plus from planning perspective, again, we have the insight what's happening in investment management, and we can start integrating at some point to platforms. And again, we can really focus for that advisors are doing what they are doing, but just faster, easier, better, and they can better serve their clients. I think one thing that I wanted to add about the partnership is that I think there's Chinese proverb that says that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I think this partnership is really for me is just starting really. It's really a milestone and starting on a relationship that can we can really build something amazing together.
We're going to go far and fast, right?
Well, it's not or. Yeah. We can go fast and far.
Two comments to that. I'm not a believer in ors, I'm a believer in ands. And secondly, why is it there's always a Chinese proverb to fit every situation?
They've been around for 6,000 plus years.
Well, fair enough.
They've experienced a lot.
There's no proverb guy in charge of that who's like supposed to make sure that this gets nurtured. And there's always a category like we need a proverb for this case. Anyway, let's move on. So let's talk about what some of this moving fast and far looks like when it's actually done. So we talked about your ability, like Tea specifically, we talked about the ability to service like 1,000 clients. Now I'm of two minds on this. At the end of the day, I'm a believer in things like the Dunbar number and Liebig's law, which basically limits the amount of people we can actually deal with. But that's on a comprehensive, like very high touch basis, right? You're on the other end of that spectrum. You're a robo, which is meant to basically be designed for simplicity, speed, and mass market, right? Tell me about like how you envision the final kind of, if you had your way, now that Snap's on board and you can drive this agenda, if you had your way, what's the end product experience look like from the client and advisor standpoint?
So it's interesting because I've always had this vision in my mind of a busy mom walking into her house with a bunch of groceries and getting a push notification from Wealthbar that something, some trigger has either RSP season started or TFSA contribution limit increased, or it's time to deposit money into RESP or something, and that she can react to it with one button and at the same time have access to an advisor if things aren't clear enough as to what she has to do or not have to do regarding that action. So it's basically one-stop shop that is guided, that is as automated as possible on the routine tasks, but yet have that human safety net that lets you understand your finances in the context of your life and lets you move on with your life and not necessarily managing your finances. So that's very sort of storified vision where I envision financial planning, investments, insurance, mortgages, lines of credit, credit cards, personal finance solution for a Canadian household, all in one place with an advisor, a human advisor that's technology enabled as the quarterback. And for the advisors...
Yes, second part of that question.
I think that the way that I envision advisor of the future is to be slightly different than maybe perhaps the way that they work today, and move a little bit away from being the sole proprietor and the sort of the marketer of the personal business and move further into the realm of professional, salaried individual. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they won't both exist, but at least in our model, I envision my advisors to kind of be on the same level as my engineers and, be kind of use technology to do all of these tasks that advisors, let's face it, don't really like doing. They're not necessarily even good at it. And focus on, really understanding how finance fits, keeping abreast of their field in terms of budgets and legislatures so that they really know how to advise clients in the moment in a just-in-time way.
I mean, it's interesting. We're starting to see technologies that leverage artificial intelligence and greater automation and algorithms start to push into financial planning software. Which, Pawel, I'm going to ask you a couple questions about that shortly. But it's interesting because when I talk about this, I often get some advisors pushing back to almost feeling angry about it because they feel like they're cheapening their experience and knowledge. When really, what you're talking about, you said not necessarily liking it or not necessarily good at it. We're talking about the heavy lifting work of financial planning, right? And these are things that, frankly, technology does a much better job than any individual, typing their own personal spreadsheet ever will. So it's interesting because in a lot of ways, it's amazing. It's funny. You embrace something else that threatens advisors yet again, threatened by robo-advisors, threatened by technology. But again, part of the reason I started this podcast was to bridge the gap to say, hey, no, this is technology that's going to enable you, not basically threaten you. And I think you're right. It's that, again, human aspect, that interaction, the handling of people that we will not be able to replace with technology, short of some really good general purpose AI.
Yeah. And recently I actually read an article by Grant Hicks. He's one of Canada's elite insurance-focused advisors. And he had an article about time management, and how to move from being an average advisor to being an elite advisor. And the 4 tasks that he recommends that advisors stop doing or start doing less, and he has percentages of time that elite advisors do these tasks and the percentages of time that average advisors do these tasks versus the one that are actually making you money. The 4 tasks that he wants you to reduce spending time on are the 4 things that can be replaced by a robo-advisor. And I found that incredibly, back-end processes, researching investments, doing transactions, filling forms, all of these things. That's basically what my platform is. And focus on servicing your clients, relationship building with your clients, because that's where the bread and butter is, right? That's what gets you, in the end, gets you more clients and gets you referral and keeps that connection. So I found it really interesting that even he actually recognized that in a roundabout way. I think the time will come when the twain will merge. We have to just be patient and wait till we get the critical mass with the advisors. But I think there will be time when the technology will mature. And just like with anything, adoption will hit the majority and it will just go mainstream. I hope. I know I'm right.
Well, I mean, you're talking about, I think it's also partially generational in that you're talking about people who, felt like their job was to get all this work done, and they did that for 20, 30 years. And then you're telling them, no, your job's not to do that, it's to do the other stuff, right? And you know what? Some of us actually do some people got into it because they did like thinking they could research investments or do the heavy lifting on the planning, and that was the skill set. But the reality is anything that can be replaced with an algorithm is not long-term viable, and frankly, is going to be done more effectively by said algorithm in many cases, right? So I totally agree with that viewpoint. And this is a model that exists elsewhere. The U.S. is more automated than we are, and TAMP model usage in the U.S. is increasing every year. And TAMP's basically a lot of ways just like robos. They help you with the onboarding, the management, the rebalancing, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So Pawel, now let's talk about your contribution to Tea's vision, or your shared vision, as I joke around here. So basically, this is a tall order. So you're talking about accelerating the things you want to do. Tell me about some of the automation tasks, or the way you're going to eliminate the friction and heavy lifting for the advisors' lives going forward.
Yeah. So again, that's a really good question, Jason. So let me just start with something, just how we think about building the technology, right? Because there's one big vision, for example, this 10-year vision or 20-year vision, hopefully 10-year vision instead of 20 years or more or longer. But just how we've built and really how we've built the product so far is it's not just the one feature that's going to change, that's going to make a big change for example, in the workflows for advisors. But it's really constant attention, making those small adjustments, small enhancements to the product that basically ends up being offering a great experience. So, for example, the one thing that's about Snap, how we're thinking about implementing that. Well, it's just planning is different than investment management. There is a lot of qualitative information and quantitative information that you have to take into account. But when you're dealing with qualitative information, it's really difficult to design one algorithm for basically handling all those different cases. So the one thing that I think we've done really well is just we basically design the software as just with having this one-page view. So advisors can, for example, see, okay, well, this is after entering all the information, and it's a fairly streamlined process. They get to this one planning page, and then they get to, for example, they see what the platform would recommend, for example, in terms of withdrawals from in retirement. But they get to also make decisions about it. They can make changes. So, and that's the one thing that's really critical, especially planning retirement and especially retirement income planning. You're dealing with many different sources of income. You could be dealing with, 8, 10, even more sources of income, all the way from CPP to OAS to, let's say, defined benefit pension plan, defined contribution pension plan, RSP accounts, TFSA accounts, non-registered, maybe holding company, there's dividends, maybe salary, and so on. So ability, for example, for the advisor, take a look at every single situation. Let's say after, let's assume that at this, we can get the data into the software, import the data into the software automatically from the investment side. Now
I should hope you can do that now that you're owned by Snap Projection. So let's just hope that integrates at the top of your list.
Yeah, so this is the first step. It's an easy step, right? But it's basically once we have the data in, then we can basically start looking and making those adjustments. And in a lot of cases, it actually takes an advisor to make those adjustments. I don't really think we can really have a fully automated tool that can provide this best solution for every single case. It's all about providing recommendations to the advisor. So I think there is a large opportunity for us to basically make this process even better. And that's what we're planning to do, really capitalize on expanding on this one-page view that we have right now in Snap Projections. Another thing is, of course, there's a lot of challenges around data entry. So that's one thing. About, for example, generating multiple scenarios. that's one thing that's, again, Snap really shines in. And you can, for example, create multiple different scenarios very quickly. Let's say you have one scenario and you're, for example, talking with a client about maybe an alternative approach. Instead of thinking about, applying some rules of thumb that you should be riffing at 71, for example, well, you can test another scenario very quickly. And I think that's another opportunity that we're going to expand the platform. It's all about really taking away, just making planning really pleasant and easy to use, right? We don't have to use, old complex tools with lots of inputs, and it's all about making sure that information that they're using to make decisions is right in front of us. So that's how really I'm thinking about further developing the platform. Of course, from our perspective, we have 600, 700 feature requests on the list right now, and we're very careful about how we are picking and prioritizing the different features. But again, the feature focus for us, APIs, I mentioned this already, right? Decumulation, so a lot more focus on decumulation, stress testing, and of the portfolio. And for example, things like we've been looking at for quite a while at Monte Carlo and some of the issues around stress testing. So I think that's one huge area that we haven't really explored that much that I want to spend a little bit more time. So again, there is, as I said, there was a lot of opportunity for us to basically still work with Wealthbar and make sure that we can capitalize on the relationship and further expand on the platform and on its capabilities.
Yeah, so a couple of points there could cover a lot. So let me correct my previous statement in that the algorithm is better at doing the heavy lifting, but the human being still involved in making sure it's going to actually match up with the client's reality. So it can give us the various options you talked about in a faster, better, more effective way. And a couple of other things too, like I complimented you on this last time. First time I looked at your software, I thought, well, this is an online spreadsheet. And then I thought to myself, that's the genius of it.
Smart spreadsheet.
It's not
exactly.
It's like everything is, there's so many planning softwares. You work through all these different screens to end up getting to a final screen that basically allows you to audit everything. You've built the audit into the interface, so that's smart. Also, I think the approachableness of the entire thing is significantly better than other ones, right? Like you said, overly complex, and it can be difficult. And I think you've Occam's razor the entire thing. You've kept it simple, you've kept it focused, and I think that makes it far more approachable. And I think one of the things the two major pushbacks on advisors who've been in this business for a long time who don't do comprehensive planning has always been, quite frankly, there's a bunch of excuses, but it takes forever. Well, you've shortened the span of that, and I think it's only going to get shorter from that from here on out. B, it's too complicated, and they get intimidated by the software. You don't have that problem. And C, it takes too long, which again, keeping it simple helps, and straightforward helps do that and provide high value. So good. So this, the marriage is a couple months in. Things are going well, and I expect big things from you people. So keep it up.
I think Michael and I expect really good things from ourselves. So we're both very overachievers. So it's a good thing.
Good. Honestly, when I saw the announcement, I thought, well, that's a great matchup in a non-sarcastic tone. Like I sounded a little bit sarcastic there. I wanted to come out that way. So normally we talk, yeah. So normally I ask you individually more questions, but we're going to run super long if I do that. But here's the thing. So we're going to wrap up my three questions, which I'm going to ask to both of you, and so that will take us well beyond the more than half an hour we normally do. So the first question I have for both of you, and again, Tea, go first. If you had one wish for something can change in your business, in the industry as a whole, or if the world as a whole, what would it be?
The level of financial literacy in an average Canadian would go up tenfold.
Well, yeah.
That's my wish.
What's interesting is I read a study that said that we actually scored amongst the top in the world in financial literacy, but that score was still a C-. Yeah, it's congratulations. We won a race of people who lost. So yeah, that definitely needs to happen.
Yeah, being the best of the worst is still not good.
No, I agree.
People tell me who my biggest competitor is, and I always say the lack of education, like the lack of understanding and the lack of, and people through no fault of their own buying into fads and marketing and sensationalism of the media, and not really financial planning and investment management is a slow and boring process. If it's exciting, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, I often say, when I teach, I often say, like, so you've seen, movies about people running money in Hollywood. Yeah, ignore all that. It's all a lie. Like it doesn't work that way, and we don't pretend for it to work that way. And this is where I actually take issue with the commercials that the CPAs put out about how like they live this. Like, you ever seen these ones where like they're on helicopters and on top of job sites and doing all this other stuff? And it's like, no, you're at a computer inputting numbers. Stop pretending that you are like an action hero. Like, this is not true. Anyway, so Pawel, your wish.
My wish, I'm going to be focused really very much on financial planning. I would like to change one thing in the tax system. And it's a subtle change, but it's going to...
Just one thing?
One thing. So if I'm going to pick one thing, I'm going to say that let's assess taxation on a household level versus individual level. Because as much as we spent 5 years building financial planning software, it doesn't really make sense and it's not fair to basically assess taxation on an individual level. It's so problematic and it creates so many issues. For example, the pension income splitting, attribution rules, their spousal, for example, loans. There's so many different planning, practices that basically have been developed only really to patch an actual system that has been not architected in the right way. So if I would have one wish, let's change that and let's go from there.
So yeah, I that's one of the top things on my list in terms of tax reform. And having looked at, for those of you in the US listening to this podcast, you're like, what do you mean you can't tax at a household level? Well, welcome to Canada. We have a bunch of things backwards. Interestingly enough, so yeah, when I saw that in the US, I started, doing the US CFP, I started thinking about what the merits of it, or if it was right or wrong or whatever else. And frankly, yeah, it makes so much sense. It fails to, individual taxation fails to take into account the contribution of stay-at-home spouses who, frankly, if not for them staying at home and taking care of various other household affairs, other people such as myself, like entrepreneurs, my wife is not a stay-at-home spouse, but nevertheless, would not be able to achieve the things that they can without the support, right? It's just, it makes little to no sense in my mind. And small fact, it was a small interesting point. The Carter Commission in the 70s, which established our current tax paradigm in Canada, actually initially recommended that, and it was not followed. And then one last side note for the record, a very well-known tax aficionado in this country, when I spoke to him about, are they ever going to look at this? He said, no. And I'm like, well, what's the reticence? He goes, you're not going to believe this, but, and this should, by the way, this should outrage every feminist in the world. They said, well, they're afraid that if they do that, it's going to encourage more women to stay at home. I was like, that's the most condescending thing I've ever heard said in tax policy.
That makes no sense. Okay, whatever.
So anyone from CRA listening to this, or finance listening to this, which is probably next to none, just please get your heads out of your butts on this point. Pawel is right. Anyway, and we need a new Carter Commission. That's a different story altogether. Unfortunately, the tax code's only getting worse, not better. So, second point, and actually the second question, Pawel, which I'm going to ask, may actually come out of taxes. We'll come back to that. Second question, what is the biggest challenge you face in scaling to where you are today? Tea, you first.
Can I say lack of financial literacy again?
You can, because I think you're absolutely right there. I think that with proper financial literacy, the demand for everything you do would be significantly higher, wouldn't it?
Exactly. So basically, I set out to introduce a dose of benevolence into financial industry with our product offering and our fiduciary responsibility, even though this is, a word that all the PR managers tell you never to use on a client-facing or public-facing podcast or media. But basically, we have best interest of our clients at our heart, and we have tenets, best interest duties, a tenet of Wealthbar from day one, even though it's looking like the regulators are going to actually make it a legal concept. Uh-huh. But it's, yes, if everybody knew what I know, they would clearly choose Wealthbar.
Way to give yourself a ringing endorsement. So, Pawel, what was your answer? And you can say tax code if you want.
No, I don't think it's going to be tax. I mean, tax. Well, I think we can get around tax, but I think the challenge. This is kind of interesting, right? Because it's for us scaling a fintech company in a self-funded way. That was a huge challenge for me, right? Just being able to invest team and in the product. It was very essentially lack of resources, and that's essentially largely solved with the partnership, right? I mean, we basically not too many people know probably that I started a company back in Edmonton, Alberta, and then about 2 years ago we moved to Ontario. Then I just basically moved the company to Ontario, actually incorporated another company in Ontario, and I was basically I was looking to partner up, and was essentially looking for resources, looking for a right partner, and so the timing was perfect for that. And I don't know what's going to be next challenge for us on the list, but I think that one of the biggest challenges for me was basically a lack of resources, which is largely addressed by the partnership.
Yep, I've seen a grand total of one financial planning software ever attract a check from a VC. And it's they do not look at it as the exponential growth market that it should be looked at, because frankly, if people had the financial literacy piece down, it would be an exponential growth industry. Okay.
Absolutely. And Jason, I think this is for sure. I mean, this is not an industry where you can basically deploy 10 million and get 10x return within 3 years, right? I think there is a lot of opportunity there's even education. Even, for example, it's not about here's the platform, here's the tool, but we've launched our podcast essentially, 18 months ago, maybe a little more, just 2018. We've had over 80,000 people downloading and listening to the podcast in such a small industry. I was actually shocked. There's huge need for education, as not just in the consumer market, but even for advisors. It's developing software product or platform is one thing, but another thing is actually basically showing people this is how you use it. This is how we can be effective with this. This is how you change basically the mindset of advisors, as you said earlier in the conversation, right? People were trying to do something different, 20 years ago, and then there is a massive mind shift. They have to basically adopt to a new reality. So that's why the traditional investing that may work in, Silicon Valley for global businesses, it's not going to work for, in the fintech space, especially fintech space in Canada.
No, it's difficult. Even in the US, it's been difficult. But nevertheless, so the only question I have to follow up that one is how many of those downloads were my episode?
Sorry, what's the follow-up?
I'm just highly competitive. Sorry.
Well, you've been doing very well. I think it's number one still. So you've done something very, very well.
Good. I managed to not bore everybody. That's fantastic. So the last question to ask you both, and financial literacy can't be your answer again, is what excites you and gets you out of bed, keep going every morning and do what it is you're doing?
Oh, that's definitely not financial literacy. That is the way that industry is changing. And I think that the level of automation and the technology proliferation that I can see on the horizon. Not very many people know that I attempted to do something like this with Chris back in 2001. And we were actually going to incorporate a company called Fintech Inc. So I remember I sent a request to a mutual fund company, and I can't remember which one it was, but I sent a request for data feeds, for electronic data feeds.
Did they laugh?
Sorry?
And then you just turn around and start laughing?
Well, no, they said, yeah, sure, no problem. And I was just shocked as to how easily they agreed to do this. And so 3 days later, I received via ICS a CD with PDF statements. So
they didn't understand the word feed.
Right. And I was also a bit shocked at the lack of questions that they asked as to okay, we're going to send the feed, maybe our IT department should call your IT department or something. But no, so they sent me this and I said, okay, I don't think that the industry is ready. I don't think that the clients are ready. So we're going to park this for a while. And then we resurrected it in late 2011 and incorporated in 2012. So what really excites me, that despite the fact that it took 10 years longer than I thought, it's actually coming. And because fintech or financial services is such a heavily regulated and domain is relatively difficult for tech industry, we were slow adopters of the tech revolution. So it took us .com started in 2000s and Facebook launched in 2007. And fintech didn't actually gain their legs until early 2010s. But it's a really, really interesting world to be in financial services industry. And the way that I can see that even AI will play some part in not too distant future in certain transactions in financial services industry is really, really exciting.
I can only imagine if they had said, no problem, we'll send you that data feed by courier.
Yeah, they didn't say that. They didn't say by courier, which I'm like,
I wish they had. What do you mean you're surprised by the way sent it by courier? Oh God. Okay. I'm going to laugh about this the rest of the day. Pawel, same question to you. Pawel, what excites you the most about what it is you're working on and keeps you going every day?
Yeah, it's going to be relatively similar to what I mentioned. I mean, fundamentally for me, the things that really excite me is just really helping people and having impact and helping people. That's really, when we started, actually before even writing first code for Snap Projections, I thought, well, first of all, I want to have a problem that I can work for 10 years plus. And financial planning and really helping improve the industry, that seemed like a great problem to solve. And we started with financial planning. So we are working with advisors, and we managed to help tens of thousands of Canadian consumers right now. And I think we can scale up to millions at this point. So that's definitely motivating. And having impact, I mean, that's another thing. The industry is changing right in front of our eyes. I mean, FPAC is being launched right now, Jason, and so thank you for that. And I very much think about what we're doing as sort of arming the rebels. And by the rebels, I mean the independent financial advisors, because a very healthy independent channel, I believe, is really critical to the health of the financial services industry here in Canada. So that's really incredibly exciting to see the impact, and I feel grateful for being able to be part of it.
So finding the rebels. So funny side note, when I was working on starting the Financial Planning Association of Canada, we had the first group and we had our Slack channel. The original logo was a pirate flag. And then I quickly changed it to the logo, the temporary logo until we had a real one, was a pirate flag. And then I quickly changed it to the logo for the Rebel Alliance from Star Wars.
I was going for Star Wars more,
somewhere.
Yeah. And you can make a guess of who the Empire is in Canada, or empires are. Very, very intent on blowing up the Death Star while we're at it. So, so both of you, thank you very much for coming on. I think this is the most laughing I've done on any podcast. So it's Richard. And I now have a new anecdote about currying data feeds that is going to be retold across the industry. So that is fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
All right. Thanks. Take care and best luck.
That was a lot of fun, Jason.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
So that was my interview with Tea Nicola and Pawel Brzeminski. I hope you enjoyed that. I particularly hope you enjoyed the joke about the data feed arriving on a CD as a bunch of PDF documents. That is a anecdote that will live in infamy forever now. So as always, if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, I'm Jason Pereira. Take care.
This podcast was brought to you by Woodgate Financial, an award-winning financial planning firm catering to high net worth individuals and their families. To learn more, go to woodgate.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play, or find more episodes at fintechimpact.co.